is out. The White House Chief of Staff gets bounced from the Trump administration.
Readying his pen, the U.S. president says he will sign a bill that puts new sanctions on Russia. Also ahead this hour.
Pyongyang's threat. North Korea says its latest missile test proves it can strike the entire U.S. mainland.
5 a.m. on the U.S. East Coast. We want to welcome our viewers here in the United States and all around the world. I'm George Howell at CNN World Headquarters in Atlanta.
And I'm Hannah Vaughan-Jones live for you here in London. Thanks for joining us. CNN Newsroom starts right now. This hour with a big shake-up at the White House, which caps a tumultuous week for the Trump administration. U.S. President Donald Trump has a new chief of staff. He's tapped his Homeland Security Secretary, General John Kelly, to take over the job. That means, of course, that Reince Priebus is out after just 189 days in the West Wing, one of the shortest tenures ever for that position. CNN's Jeff Zeleny is at the White House with more.
President Trump making one of the biggest shakeups of his administration so far, about 6 months in, announcing a new chief of staff, accepting the resignation of Chief of Staff Reince Priebus and saying he will name General John Kelly, who's currently the Homeland Security Secretary. He will start on Monday as the new chief of staff here at the White House. It is a sign, the president said, that he needs a new direction going forward, new leadership going forward. Now, this comes at the end of a tumultuous week here at the White House, where a week after the new communications director, Anthony Scaramucci, was appointed, had a very public and remarkably vulgar feud with Reince Priebus, the chief of staff. All that coming to an end. Reince Priebus saying he's going to resign. He still supports the president, but knows that the president needs a new direction here. But now appointing General John Kelly, chief of staff, gives what many advisors and supporters of the president hope is a new direction, some new discipline on this White House as it tries to move its agenda forward. This week saw a collapse of the Republican health care bill. It saw a public feud with the Attorney General. It saw a rift with the Pentagon over a decision for essentially banning transgendered service members from serving in the military. So this is a moment for a reset for this president. General John Kelly, a four-star general who has a decorated service record. He starts here on Monday. Reince Priebus, the former chairman of the Republican National Committee, he said he'll start taking a vacation. Jeff Zeleny, CNN, the White House.
Jeff, thanks for the reporting. Priebus gave his first interview to my colleague Wolf Blitzer after resigning. Wolf asked Priebus to respond to the ugly comments made about him, some comments that I can't even say on television, several days ago by the incoming communications director, Anthony Scaramucci. Listen.
What was the impact? The new White House communications director, Anthony Scaramucci, you saw the interview. He granted Ryan Liz in the New Yorker magazine. He called you some awful things, including a paranoid schizophrenic. He said your days were numbered. He said you were about to leave. At one point, he said Reince Priebus would resign soon, and that he expected Priebus to launch a campaign against him. What was your reaction when you saw that interview?
No reaction, because I'm not going to respond to it. I'm not going to get into the mud on those sorts of things. Look, the president and I had an understanding. We've talked about this many times, and we ultimately decided that yesterday was a good day and that we would work together, and I think that General Kelly is a great pick. So I'm not going to get into the weeds on that. I support what the president did, and obviously I think it's a good thing for the White House.
Priebus was noticeably absent from the White House photo this Friday. That photo shows the president on the phone in the White House Treaty Room. A number of senior advisors were also present there, including National Security Advisor H.R. McMaster. Normally, Priebus would have been near there as well. With us now to talk more about these developments is Inderjeet Parmar, a professor of international politics at City University of London. It's good to have you with us this hour in our London bureau. The New York Post compared what we're seeing, so many people leaving the White House, compared it to a reality show. I want you to take a look at this, Inderjeet, because you get a sense here, Survivor, That's the comparison that's being made, but let's take a look specifically at what has been the revolving door of this White House. People who were either hired, then fired, or hired and resigned. There's an image that we have here to show our viewers how many people have come and gone from this White House. You get a sense here of what's happened. What will this latest departure mean for President Trump and his administration?
Well, it just suggests that the character of this administration is becoming better and better known. And it appears to be that President Trump is continuing to govern much the way in which his election campaign was run. That is to say, it lurches from one crisis to another. It leads to sackings of key individuals, the appointment of new individuals. But as we know, in the campaign, it actually worked. He won the election. And I wonder whether or not President Trump has fully comprehended the distinction between running a campaign for office and actually governing itself. And it seems to be that he is the central individual, the central person in the entire administration, and he decides when anybody comes and goes, and he appears to be building up something along the lines of a personality cult, and I think he demands personal loyalty from everyone that is appointed and works around him. And I'm afraid that the issue is that many of the people that he's appointed actually have very successful careers in other areas of life, and they're not used to being treated in that kind of way. They're actually sworn to uphold the Constitution and the Bill of Rights and not owe necessarily personal loyalty to a particular individual.
History is always the judge, Inderjeet, so let's take a look back at Reince Priebus in his defense of President Trump on the issue of Russia, a defense that, looking back, clearly has some holes in it. Let's look.
The collusion story is a joke. I honestly don't believe there's a lot of people out there that actually believe that campaign people were sitting on telephones and having meetings and passing secret messages trying to figure out how to mess around with the election. It's ridiculous. But yet, if you look at headlines over the last 6 months, you would think that that's the only thing happening in the world.
History is a very precise judge here, so these officials who take on this role to defend the president, be he right or wrong, only to later have their credibility damaged, as we just saw there, and then to be shown the door. What does it say for the president's ability to recruit for these important positions?
I think it's going to be more and more difficult to recruit people of integrity into an office. One of the key issues is when you occupy an office in the federal executive, such as even the sort of chief of staff of the White House or whatever, the key issue is that those people have very strong ideas about how things ought to be. But President Trump basically undermines without consultation, and he carries out policies. So General Mattis this week, for example, was not even consulted on the transgender ban that was promulgated. He was given 1 day's notice. But this is not the first and the only time. Rex Tillerson has been undermined. Even within his own camp, if you like, Ivanka Trump was undermined as well on the Paris Climate Accord. So what we have is an individual who basically is running a personal government. And I think that is a very dangerous thing because, if you like, what does this say about the American political system to those who are not involved within it, those who are actually at the receiving end of it, that is the domestic population and electorate and the rest of the world? And the standing of the United States government, both at home and abroad, is very, very low and is probably at the lowest point for many decades. And I think President Trump is largely responsible for that. His style is not suited to governing. He has actually no legislative accomplishments after 6 months to his name. Pretty much everything that he's touched is collapsing around him. And the different groups that are around this administration, some of them are actually quite pleased. I think Mike Pence will be smiling. I think he's done very well. I think Wall Street, or parts of it, are doing quite well. The deregulation of big corporations, the fact that you can get a federal contract even if you've violated labor or wage regulations, I think they're doing quite well. But I think as far as the American electorate is concerned, they're getting a psychological wage perhaps. His nationalist base probably thinks, well, there is a There's a strong white man in the White House, and we're doing very well. He's really socking it to the establishment. But actually, I think when they count the pennies and pence, the pounds and pence in their pockets from the plans that he has, I don't think they're going to benefit very much. And I think that's going to undermine his credibility. And I think by November 2018, I suspect this leaking ship is going to be very close to being sunk altogether.
Inderjeet, however, though, with John Kelly in the spot now, given his military background, do you expect him to bring a new level of stability to the White House?
It's very difficult to say that because there are many people with military backgrounds which are very close and are appointed to this White House. General Mattis, I mean, you want to find a sterling military record, there you have it. General McMaster, sterling military record, a record of independence, a person who criticized the Joint Chiefs of Staff about the way they ran the Vietnam War, kind of a warrior intellectual. He's been undermined and sidelined. He wasn't even involved in the meetings with President Putin, for example, that at the G20 that President Trump had. I don't think anybody stands a chance in the way in which President Trump runs the White House. He demands personal loyalty. He doesn't have any respect for the rule of law. He doesn't think the rule of law really applies to his presidency or himself, and I think that's probably one of the biggest problems that he has with Robert Mueller, the special counsel. That is, they're investigating his behavior, his finances, his possible other irregularities. That is getting very close, and that's partly part of the reason why Attorney General Sessions has been so deeply undermined this week, and he wants him to resign. I don't think Sessions is going to go without being sacked. That's going to deepen the crisis even more. One wonders how deep this crisis will get before the Republican Party in Congress and in the Senate actually does something serious and actually repudiates this president and says that he does not stand for the United States or the Republican Party or republicanism in general, let alone the Democratic Party and what it stands for.
Inderjeet Parmar, live for us in London. Thank you for the insight.
Thank you very much.